All right, we're going to finish this diagram up today with the last of the information that you learned from your reading. The energy we're actually going to be a little bit more specific about as to how much energy is created in each step. You've learned about ATPs and how an ATP molecule is actually how energy is stored. And so in the first glycolysis step, we now know that this is actually 2 ATP molecules. The second step doesn't produce any energy per se. The third step is actually another one where we produce 2 ATP molecules. And the fourth step is where a whole lot of energy is produced. And here we've produced 32 ATP molecules. So if I add all those together, 32 plus 2 plus 2 gives me 36. So once I break down 1 molecule of glucose, that will ultimately produce 36 molecules of ATP. The other question that we want to address is where oxygen is necessary and when it's not necessary. You know that when you exercise, a lot of times you'll start breathing harder because you need to take in extra oxygen because of the glucose that you're burning. And so at some point, your muscles start to get really sore because your cells start to produce lactic acid because they can't do everything in an aerobic process because you can't take in that much oxygen all at once for the amount of energy they're burning at once. So this very first step is actually anaerobic. An anaerobic process means it can take place without oxygen being present. Now you'll notice that you don't have to have oxygen present to produce at least a little bit of energy, but you're not going to be able to produce a large amount unless you've got oxygen present, because as you can see in the Krebs cycle and the electron transport system, both of these require oxygen in order to happen. So the Krebs cycle is aerobic, means it requires oxygen. The electron transport system is aerobic. It also requires oxygen in order to happen. You wouldn't be faulted for thinking that this second step is also anaerobic because you don't see any oxygen happen. But what happens is that the acetyl coenzyme A that's produced here is used up here. And so the cell is not going to bother making this if there's no oxygen present for it to be used up in this step. So the cell's smart enough to realize, well, there's no oxygen, so I'm not gonna bother making this since it can't be used right now. So this step actually won't happen either unless there is oxygen present. So the first step is anaerobic, and the last 3 steps are aerobic, which means they do require oxygen to take place. Okay, so oxygen has to happen for the majority of the process. You can produce a small amount of energy if you're not in the presence of oxygen, and that's the first step. But as you can see, that's only 2 ATPs, and I can produce 34 if I have oxygen there. So the cell can produce a lot more energy if it has oxygen present.